Hi, so in this video, we will look at creating in the SRC file for the token transaction of the transaction that you're interested in. There can be quite a bit of variety with what exactly is required and like the files that you'll need to change. There might be a requirement to look at these as well, but for now, I'm just going to focus on the token file. And let's look at some examples. So we have token delete, token create, and token associate. Okay, so let's get started with looking at the token create SRC file. This is creating a token create transaction class. This represents a token creation transaction. It creates a new token with the requirements that you need, and it uses the methods to build and execute a token creation transaction. In other words, this is going to take the user's inputs that we saw from the example file, where the user is inputting the token name that you want to create and the initial supply, all these things, and it's going to convert it into a computer format that can interact in the desired way. Okay, so here we have a new transaction instance with the possible arguments. So when you create a token, some of the arguments, this looks like a fungible token. Yeah, some of these arguments are going to be required. So for example, token name, symbol, decimal, supply, treasury account ID, admin key, all these things need to be written down into this transaction. One thing that confused me initially is like the transaction fee. As a rule of thumb, I'm just doing similar transaction fees. That's just my approach. I don't know how you would want to do it. Yeah, I don't. I think the user can like decide, override what the transaction fee will be, but I don't know. I don't know too much about that. These fields, we're going to set them as none, showing that they are kind of technically optional for now, but later on we're going to test that some of these things are actually going to be needed for the transaction to be valid. So inside this token create, we have given the tokens a name. So we're going to say that we're going to require like a name. It can't be frozen. It needs to have a symbol, decimals. So we're going to make sure that we're going to have all these fields required for the token create. We're going to then get ready to create the token creation transaction in this protobuf format. So we have this Python code that's taking this user data, but to interact with the network, we're going to need it to work correctly with the protobuf requirements and actually, be in this protobuf format. So it's going to have to flag any of the issues that we discussed, like if there's no token name and let's say that's required, it's got to kind of tell you that there's an error because the protobuf requires you to have that, so it's not valid protobuf. So here in this case, we learn that this particular transaction token create is going to require you to have all of these set. So you need to have a token name, symbol, you need to have decimals, you need to have supply, treasury, account IDs. This is what the protobuf requires. This bit here, testing my memory a little bit now, but I think it was something along the lines of, like you need to have an admin key in that, and it needs to be put into this proto format. That was a fun day for me. I had to had to find out exactly the format required for the admin key, because the user gives it to you in a certain way, and you need to make sure that it's in exactly this. It looks like this ed something like this. So basically I had to keep digging into this. You should be able to. I don't know. On my computer, I can like control my way through all of this and just keep digging and learning more about like the underlying of what this data looks like and what it needs to be like for the protobuf. So I would say this bit was quite a difficult thing. And it also involved using these kind of other code that has already been constructed and leveraging that. So these might be in other parts of the files. So you'll have to check whether each of these do the certain thing that you're looking to do. And yeah, so it's just like a introduction to, hey, you're gonna have some fun. You're gonna have some fun with that. Okay, so then we're gonna create this this transaction body, and all of this kind of into this proto format, and then we are going to execute this transaction. And then we're going to get the response. Is there an error or is it okay? And we're going to get a receipt. So these, I think, are kind of similar for at least the ones that I have seen. Similar kind of receipt method, similar execute transaction method. There might be a little bit of differences. That there is before I forget, there is some differences for some of them, but they're more similar than dissimilar. And then this kind of like initial setup there where these optional fields, which we'll then check later, is quite similar with the different transactions. So let's take a look. So now we have token delete. Similar kind of like format for the description. We're creating a class, token delete class, and this is a token delete transaction. We're going to initialize it with these optional variables. Remember when we looked at the protobuf for token delete, it actually didn't really require anything but the token delete. It had to be signed, but the instance didn't. So then we're gonna have to define all these things. So we're gonna have to get the token ID to be deleted. Then we're gonna build the transaction. We're going to verify whether these fields that were previously optional are actually added in by the user for it to be in a valid protobuf format. So checking everything is in this protobuf format. I think this wasn't too bad because it didn't require this private key investigation and learning about cryptography with that. And then you can see it's a really, really similar execute transaction. In fact, it might be the same. And then really similar receipt process. So this is the kind of example of what you would need to do. Again, what exactly you need to do comes from the protobuf. The protobuf tells you it only needs a token ID. So just those, by looking at the protobuf, you'll be able to see what is required. So that's the token associate, and then we are nearly there. So this is going to associate the transactions. We're creating the class. We're creating the transaction. These so what is this token associate? Remember, you need to provide the account that you want to associate the transactions, and you need to provide the list of the token IDs that you want to associate. In this case, there are optional arguments, but later on in the protobuf, we're going to have to make sure that they have actually been put in. So in this example, we are detailing like the format required for these, the transaction fee required for this. We are making sure these things are not frozen, and we can actually define them. All right, and once we have all of those, we're then going to create the transaction body. So for the token associate transaction body, what we required was the account, the token, and then we had to make sure that all of this was in the proto format for the token ID. I think that meant you can't just do token 0.0123. Has to be like in a specific, like what is it, shard realm, something like this. So there are functions in the code that will help you to convert those to the required format. So you have to, again, make sure by looking at the protobuf that you are really pushing the right data into it to make sure that you're getting it into the required proto format. And then when that's all good set up, we then can execute the transaction. So we get the good or the error response. I think this looks really, really similar. The description has obviously changed, but no specific things required for this. I think we do need to sign things, but not in the transaction itself. We just sign the transaction later on, so it will be more in the use of token associate. You will need to sign it, but the transaction is not. Then we're going to get the receipt and the error. So it's really, really, really similar, but there is, you have to look at the protobuf, and then you have to make sure that you are converting it to the right protobuf. And then that will mean getting really clear on, okay, what format does the token need to be for this proto? What format do I have it in now? And then making sure that you have the correct functions to convert it. So inside the SRC file, you can explore different parts of it if you need. So if I remember, yeah, like this is where, for example, I learned more about these keys and what functions were available to me to kind of convert a key to another format. So all these files are really useful in some cases and necessary, in fact, in some cases. I may have had to extend some of these, but I am not too sure if I ultimately did. But all these other things can be useful, but I think the main thing is just kind of this token file ultimately. But just be aware that some things will require you to also look at the other things and maybe even change some of them. Okay, so that sums up the SRC or the classes or the transactions that you have created. Next up, we'll be looking at the unit tests in the test folder, learning about how to create those and the formats required for that.